Hello everybody. Today I'd like to explain why horror movies are still my favorite genre. It all started in the early 1990s with a show called Are You Afraid of the Dark? Unlike other Nickelodeon shows at the time that were usually comedy sketches or cartoons, Are You Afraid of the Dark was a straight up horror show that sometimes had elements of sci-fi and fantasy as well. Unlike kids shows nowadays, which usually play it safe, mostly because of oversensitive parents groups, Are You Afraid of the Dark had stories that didn't hold back. Yes, they might not have been filled with gore and violence, it was a kids show, but they did try to scare kids, and that's what's important. So, submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, I call this review the top 5 greatest episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Number 5, The Tale of the Long Ago Locket.
The Tale of the Long Ago Locket is about a teenage boy who accidentally travels back in time to the time of the Revolutionary War and meets a Minuteman who is desperately trying to escape from the British, get back to his town, and tell the woman he loves his feelings about her. Okay, you got me. The first episode I'm talking about isn't even a horror story. I guess I'm just a sucker for a good time travel story. What I really liked about this episode is that there isn't a time machine or anything over the top for the main character to use to travel back into the past with. He simply stumbles back into the past while in the woods and seems to keep being able to travel in time at random moments. What's also great about this story is that it actually has some decent acting, which is kind of rare for this show. This is thanks to the actor Will Friedle, who plays the main character. Some of you may know him from Boy Meets World or various number of voices he did for many cartoons over the years. I don't critique acting often, but I have to say that his delivery made this episode that much better. At the end of the episode, the main character helps the Minuteman get to his destination, changes history for the better, and finally builds up the courage to tell the girl he likes how he really feels about her. This storyline may seem cheesy, but if you watch the episode, you'll notice the build up to the end is very well put together just for a half-hour episode.
Number 4, The Tale of the Midnight Ride.
The Tale of the Midnight Ride was my first exposure to the actual Headless Horseman tale at the tender age of 7. This may make me biased towards this episode, but I'm not sure because I've seen the episode as an adult and still enjoy it to this day. It still gives me the creeps like any good horror movie would. Basically, this story is about a kid who's new in town, is trying to make friends, and immediately gets picked on by one of the school's bullies. During a Halloween dance, he is dared to go into the woods and get a pumpkin to show the bullies and the school that he's not a coward. The head bully then tries to scare him wearing a Headless Horseman outfit. On the way back to school, the main character and the girl he likes run into a person who identifies himself as Ichabod Crane, and he asks them for directions. They tell him to go a different way than he was originally going, thus changing the story of the Headless Horseman. Now the Headless Horseman goes after the two main characters, trying to attack them before they can reach the safety of the Bridge of Souls. The reason why I love this episode is that the suspense is really well written. Like a lot of horror movie formulas, there's the fake scare, in this case the bully pretending to be the horseman, then the actual horror when the real Headless Horseman is chasing them down. It's not as good of a script as the last story I mentioned, but the terror and suspense alone certainly make up for it.
Number 3, The Tale of the Prom Queen.
The Tale of the Prom Queen is about two guys who are doing some ghost hunting, looking for the ghost of a girl who died on prom night and whose ghost appears only on that very night. They meet a girl around their age while at the cemetery, and the three of them decide to research the girl's death and find out that her boyfriend had died the same day by committing suicide. The The story ends with the two main characters finding out that the girl they met was the prom queen, and they have been talking with a ghost the whole time. She only had to find out what happened to her boyfriend before she could stop haunting the cemetery and finally rest in peace. The story was my first experience with a twist ending, which I found really enjoyable until M. Night Shyamalan ruined that for me and a lot of other people. But I'm digressing. The reason this story really stuck out for me was that it was a decent ghost story without a lot of filler. It also might not have been the scariest story out there, but it definitely didn't fail to entertain.
Number 2, The Tale of the Bookish Babysitter.
The Tale of the Bookish Babysitter is about a spoiled brat who finds out that his new babysitter is more than he bargained for. She makes him turn off the TV and read from her books for only a few minutes. He gives up on them only to find out that the stories in them have come to life. In the end, the main character has to use the power of his own imagination to finish the story and save his own life in the process. What I liked about this story is that it was really unique and, unbeknownst to me, was my first taste of metafiction. Also, the fact that the story is completely cheesy doesn't hurt either. The main character provides a decent comic relief as a smart-ass kid who always has a funny line or two. What I really liked about Are You Afraid of the Dark was that it showed kids as they really were and didn't sugarcoat anything. In this episode, the main character learns a lesson about not using his imagination, and it bites him back in the end. It's not necessarily a moral lesson that all kids should be a certain way, but rather a warning that kids should exercise creativity rather than just be couch potatoes. Yes, it might have been hypocritical of a television show to tell kids they should probably put down their remote and do something creative, but I guess it's the thought that counts.
And the number 1 greatest episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark is The Tale of the Midnight Madness.
This is hands down the scariest and best episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark. It has great characters, great suspense, and excellent build-up to that suspense. The story is about an old decrepit movie theater that is soon to be closed down due to its lack of popularity. Then, out of the blue, a certain Dr. Vink, with a comes along out of the blue, offering to save the theater. He tells the main characters that the theater will be saved if and only if they show his films. Eventually, the theater shows one of Vink's horror movies, which is a silent-era vampire film, and the theater becomes more and more popular. But things go awry when the theater's manager doesn't show the other films by Vink, and the vampire from the movie comes out of the screen. I don't know if any awards were ever given to this show, but the makeup they used on the vampire in this episode probably should have won some. Some 20 years later, after seeing a plethora of horror movies, I still haven't seen anything quite as scary as the way they made this vampire look. Another thing that makes this monster creepy is that it simply doesn't say anything. And the story is not trying to be over the top. It's a subtle scare, which usually wins out in this case. I remember being 7 or 8 and hiding behind the couch when this episode came on. Still, to this day, this character still gives me the creeps. Another reason this episode is awesome is Dr. Vink. He's just a creepy weirdo, reoccurring character that's always involved in some kind of evil misdeeds. I love that he's always at the epicenter of something sinister going on in the story. I know this is only a top 5 list for this video, but I'd like to put in an honorable mention for the episode The Tale of the Dream Machine. In a nutshell, it's about a kid who finds a typewriter hidden in his basement and chooses to write a short story for his class with it. He then finds out that if it's read, the story shows up in his dreams. And if it's read aloud, the story has the risk of becoming real. The story has some really decent characters and is fun to watch, but it didn't make the list because, personally speaking, it seems a lot like a Twilight Zone episode written by Richard Matheson in the 1960s. I'm not saying they ripped off the Twilight Zone or anything, but perhaps the writer of this episode was heavily influenced by it. For that reason, it didn't make the cut. Otherwise, it's a decent story with some good suspense and nice comic relief at the appropriate moments. Well, that concludes my top 5 list of the greatest Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes. I hope you enjoyed and thanks for watching. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and add it to your favorites. Thank you.